Hello guys, Dominic again here with another video. Today I'm going to be talking about civilization. That is what human beings have built for themselves to navigate the world, typically manifesting in the form of cities with a hierarchical structure and a technological grid under the command of a hierarchical structure. And I'm going to be asking the question of has civilization ultimately been a good thing for humans and the earth and other life on the earth? Or could we be doing better? And this is the picture that shows up when you type in the word civilization for Wikipedia. And I think it's a pretty fitting picture. So the first question is that I'm going to ask: has the path humanity set for itself good? Or is the path that we're currently on good for us or good for the earth? And I would say definitely not. Humanity's path, which has been chosen by the collective, has been bad. The reasons why are fourfold mainly, not to say that you probably can't find other reasons, but I think these are the main reasons why. Number one, humanity's current way of life is unsustainable because it comes at the expense of all other life within the proximity of human habitats. That is, that in order to sustain a city, the city must seriously reshape and terraform the environment to suit the city's needs. And this is overall not good for the earth, can only sustain so many cities, and yet the demand to sustain the cities is just rising and rising. Number two, the sovereignty of each individual is significantly less than at any point in human existence. Now, this one is likely debatable, as you could look to democracy or republics and say that humans are now represented, but it still revolves around the individual delegating their sovereignty to another individual and hoping that this person is going to represent them in a way that they want them to. And not only this, it also revolves around coercing the people who lose via the voting process to conform to the winner's worldviews and whatever they had on the ballot or their candidate or whoever. So there was a time when human beings were far more free than we are now. And now we live in a state of slavery, essentially. Number three, the individuals who do not benefit from the current ways are very small in number, nor can they actually ever use all of the resources they have in a personal manner. For example, someone like Bill Gates is never going to visit all of the property that he owns. But because he can sit back and use the property to generate output as he sees fit, and because he can provide the necessary monetary requirements to acquire and sustain those lands, they're his. But this does not actually make it legitimate because he's not the one actually living there. It's just under his name. And even the people who do work these lands, they do just that. They work the land. They don't live there. And this applies for really any billionaire who owns a number of land, and even applies to the government, because it's not like the government, like in the United States, for example, is utilizing all of the land within its borders, but they still claim ownership over it all. Number four, Humans are now dependent on technology to the point where without it, we would be incapable of living. Essentially, we have become so dependent on technology, it's inseparable from us at this point. Human beings and technology are one and the same, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. However, the type of technology that we have created is only in use for unsustainable practices in an unsustainable system based on continuous outputs, which reduces the individual mainly as a power source for the technology. Essentially, humanity has created for itself a system which destroys the very planet which gives us all life, destroys the sovereignty of the individuals who make up the collective, and rewards those who not just support these reasons, but actively executes this unsustainable path and makes it a reality. So, we choose to empower the people who want this, is ultimately what it comes down to. We follow their ways and we don't really do anything that we don't work for ourselves. We work for other people is really what it comes down to. Individuals have sold themselves out and the world around them to the machinations of ill people. Because if you think that you have some sort of legitimate right to own thousands and thousands of acres of land for your own output or business models, you are not a healthy person. Because you're actively a danger to pretty much everyone around you. Now I'm going to go through each one of these reasons one by one that I listed. And the first is the fact that our current way of living is unsustainable. It comes at the expense of the environment itself. The very earth which sustains all life on it is treated as a means to an end by the ruling class, using it as a resource deposit rather than treating it as a living being. It is not accurate to think of civilization as prosperous because it functions similarly to a cancer cell. Thinking of the earth as a living organism which has different life on it, living with it in symbiotic fashion, similar to microbiome and cells within our body, it becomes clear why human civilization is a cancer. Modern progress is essentially a collective biomass which rejects the natural ways of the earth and attempts to impose itself over it with centralized technology, a foreign pathogen. So, the earth is a living thing. Modern science likes to say that it's dead, it's made up of dead matter, but this simply cannot be the case because it has life on it and it has internal fluids which functions very similarly to a body. And we use these fluids basically to power our machines, whether it's fossil fuels or water or whatever. So if our civilization, which is essentially run by technology, which is constantly needing replenishing of itself from the natural nutrients of the earth, while at the same time giving nothing back to the earth, it is a cancer. Civilization does not live in a state of homeostasis with the earth. It lives in a state of metastasis, where approximately 90% of the land biomass on the planet now is farm animals designed to sustain the populations of cities. Never before has any species ever wielded technology the way a human has, and it has been a disaster for the earth and allowed humans to extract resources similar to the Earth's bloodstream at an unprecedented rate. The economic model demands more growth, more products, more services, yet all these things they are producing comes from somewhere which ultimately none of us own. Now, there is no force in nature that tells us not to suck up all the resources from the earth. We're free to do so if we choose, but there's going to be consequences which affect us for choosing to do this, which is going to be detrimental to us all. So ultimately, these resources are not ours to take because it is harmful for all life on the planet. Taking more from the earth and giving nothing back is basically going to kill large amounts of people in the long run and large amounts of other animals who aren't people. The cancer cell attempts to take from the body because it fears the body is trying to kill it. Civilization is man's fears projected onto nature because we have forgotten how to live with it and instead live according to our own technological means. Mankind has always feared nature. Or I'm not going to say they always have, but for a long time they feared nature because it's harsh living, there's not a lot of resources, there's predators. These things have convinced people in the modern day that because these things existed in the past, nature is just out to kill us. And because of this, we have separated ourselves from nature and basically create our own biome within it that has nothing to do with nature, or very little. Because nature is all about giving. We don't give anything back. All we do is take. And if you want the ultimate proof that nature is all about giving, it gave us life to begin with. And now we use the very resources which it used to give us life to basically destroy life. Ultimately, civilization's current model is unsustainable and headed towards a serious dead end. The second reason civilization is bad is that it's bad for the people it rules over. There's no freedom for the individual within civilization because it places illegitimate demands on every individual from the time they are born. For simply being born within civilization and living within a country's jurisdiction, individuals are expected to be productive members of society, equated with what they contribute to the collective. This means that the labor you make in life is not ultimately yours. It belongs to someone else. And this is what civilization has taught people is okay. It's okay to take from others as long as it's serving the greater good of the collective. And this is why there's no freedom in civilization. It is an impersonal relationship where producers and workers that they have with the public, as millions of people who use their products will never actually meet or know the people responsible for the product, let alone how the product really functions in relation to the collective of the compartmentalized systems which make up civilization. So we have to understand that civilization is compartmentalized and it's broken up into different parts. And the lower you are on the hierarchy within civilization, the less likely you're to know and understand how all these different parts of civilization mash together. And this is why technology getting more advanced means less freedom for the individual, because the very civilization that they live within becomes more complex as time goes on. Because it becomes more complex as time goes on, they They understand and know less, meaning that the people who do know what's going on can just take more freedom from the layman because they're not building technology for the layman. They're building it for themselves and for their systems of control. Civilization always imposes laws in the name of safety to keep order within its jurisdiction. This is not done because the authorities care about the well-being of its citizens. Instead, it's done because each individual within its jurisdiction is seen as an asset to produce work for civilization. And this is how you're viewed, guys. Like the police, they're not there to keep you safe. They're there to maintain a safe working environment for the people that make up civilization and produce stuff within civilization. It's not about safety, or it's certainly not about well-being, I should say. It's about maintaining a safe environment so that the public either doesn't rebel and so that they feel safe to go to work. The problem isn't that authorities and the rich billionaires exist. Or rather, the problem isn't ambitious people. The problem is that the collective chooses to follow these ambitious people because they have cemented themselves within the systems which make up society. And society's true purpose has always been to establish a class or caste-based system based off of who was doing the work. I'm gonna read that last sentence again. Society's true purpose has always been to establish a caste or class-based system based off of who is doing the labor. Guys, this is what civilization is all about. This is why it's compartmentalized and based in hierarchy, because there are people who they have all these ideas about how they think the world should be. The problem is that they can't actually make these ideas happen because it requires the work of thousands or millions of people. Not only that, these people don't really want to do hard work. They want to sit back and tell people what to do so that they can get what they want out of people. Civilization is basically people telling other people how to live their lives so that the people telling these people how to live their lives can get the world they want. It's about imparting their worldview onto other people so that they can sit back and relax and be like, oh, look at all these good workers working for me. This is what it's about. This is why society is divided. There are people who don't want to work, but they want a whole lot done in the world. So they need other people to work for them. As long as the collective stops accepting that they need to work for others or produce for others, society will be broken. It must be accepted and understood at a fundamental level that individuals are not put on this planet to service the needs of the collective. Individuals are here to learn themselves and live their life in the best way they know how. When there's needs of others who they've never even met imposed on them, it creates disharmony in the world for everyone, because everyone's having to conform to some standard based off of people they've never even met. This is why civilization is bad for the individual. There's no freedom involved in it whatsoever. And speaking of the people who make up society in the mass scale, there are also the privileged few, and I put privileged in quotations because their privileges are more of a curse. Individuals who run civilization have always been predatory and elitist towards those they rule over. Always, always. This goes back to civilizations like Mesopotamia, for example, where you would have the scribe class who would look down on everyone else because they were illiterate and they were the only ones who could read the words of the gods. And this is how it's always been, because they know more. Well, really, it's not that they know more, it's just that they keep us all ignorant. They have incredible ideas about what they think the world should be, but they cannot actually achieve any of these ideas without convincing others to obey their word. It's always been a fairly small group of people, because the less people that there are within this small group, the more likely that they are going to adhere to the traditions which keep the ruling class in power. And this is why I say they're privileged in air quotes. These people are slaves to their traditions, which to them go back thousands of years. All these people think that they're related to some king or someone who's from Phoenicia or Babylon or something. These traditions are ancient, and they're what keeps the ruling class intact. And they need people who are going to obey these traditions. And these traditions are enforced through trauma. It's basically a huge trauma-bonded cult that thinks that they have illegitimate privileges over everyone else. Another reason is the less people that there are in positions of power, the more that there are working. So you don't want too many people just sitting back and doing whatever, because that means that civilization isn't being as productive as it could be. You need people going out there to go and do their jobs, so that way they're out there creating the world you want them to do, and not over there creating something for themselves, something more sustainable for themselves. It's about keeping people dependent and ensuring that they know less than you do. Now, I should also mention that they don't necessarily want huge numbers of workers. They want manageable numbers of workers. The only reason I say that it's large is because in proportion, like a percentage-wise, there's only like about 1% of the people kicking back and whatever, and then there's about another 95 or whatever percent out there actually doing the work. But the elite ultimately views a population that's too big as unmanageable. But within the population, there's always going to be far more people working than there are who have a life of leisure, because this is how civilization is designed. This is what the traditions of the elite are designed to uphold. These are enforced legal systems. Oh, wait, no, right here. Actually examining the ruling class amongst each civilization, there's always an unholy trinity at the center of each civilization. These are enforced legal systems, religious beliefs, and monetary systems. These three components of civilization have existed for at least 5,000 years, likely longer. The reason I say 5,000 years is because if we take the Sumerian kings list and we trace the first king, Alulim, using the Shar dating system as days rather than years, it would give us a time period of about 5,000 years, which I think is far more realistic than 450,000 years, or however far back in time he is. This trinity has convinced people to sell their life to abstract concepts which do not actually exist, run by people who are masters at convincing others to believe in lies. As long as humans give themselves over to predators, humans will always be fed on, whether it's feeding on their labor, time, and even their lives. So, I'm sure we're all familiar with the Epstein files. It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. These people are out here doing all kinds of insane stuff that is beyond just ruling over people with these coercive systems. They're engaged in definite blood cult activities. Illusions is the ill use of energy, and it's right there in the word. Ill use of ions, illusions. Ill as in you're sick, use as in you're using these things, and ions as in the energy which brings things together. They're trying to basically make people sick in the mind with their lies, so that way they can come and take an advantage. Because if you get people sick in the mind, then they're not going to have so much of a problem essentially being a cancer on the earth and contributing to metastasis. These illusions are crafted to ensure that the energy of the collective is always held in the hands of the few, who view them as livestock and wheat. And yes, the elites view the regular people they rule over as agriculture. This is what their whole Baal worship is about. Baal is the god of agriculture. He's all about propagating good harvests so long as you give to Baal what Baal wants. Right? So civilization is essentially a human farm, and it always has been. Run by people like these two on the right. And these are some Rothschilds. Technological dependency. When human beings were said to have been given the plow, and when they invented tools like the stone scythe, which allowed them to clear, plant fields at an unprecedented pace, it came at a cost. These tools, because of the labor they provided, meant that individuals were no longer free to wander the earth. They were bound to the very labor that they had produced. So if you're there for however many days, however many weeks, building shelters, building an area or growing an area that can sustain food and yield crops, and then maybe you have a place to store food, all of this stuff requires a lot of effort. And once you actually build these things, there's no point in leaving. You've become bound to the land by your labor, which would not have been possible without these tools. Technology provided the means for output at an unprecedented scale and allowed for the storage of resources so that they could be preserved for long periods of time. But this output and these resources meant that they could only be stationary, they could not be transported, and they needed to be maintained and defended. The very infrastructure that humans had made to make life less harsh and dangerous had become its own shackles by forcing humanity to bear the responsibilities of the seeds they sowed. While human beings crafted and advanced technology had integrated itself into human life in a way so that we could never leave the technological systems that we created. Humanity and technology had been married together through their outputs, which was more attractive than the sovereign authority which had guided human life on the individual level before. You see, before people could leave the land, they could migrate. But now you got this city, and it's made all these changes to the land, like when they were making the first cities in Mesopotamia. They had to drain the marshes, and this seriously altered the land. You can't just leave that. You have to stay there and maintain it, because now you've made the land work for you. And once you leave that, someone else is either going to come in and take it, or nature's going to erode it, putting all your labor to ill use. And this is really why civilization also sees people as a source of output. It's because it revolves around technique, which is your craft or your skill that you use to add materialistic value to the tribe or the city which you live in. Well, before, there was only so much work that needed to be done before the cities. People were more free, and it's been stated that the average work week was probably about 20 hours, maybe 30 for the hunter-gatherer. But now with the cities, that work toll went way up, because now instead of nature providing for you, you have to provide for yourself in a city which basically takes from nature and doesn't give anything back to nature. Like when they drained those swamps, all it did was it took the natural life and their habitat and it turned them into aqueducts and it turned it into farmland. Well, if you're some sort of marsh creature, that's a more difficult land to live in with less abundance. But for the humans, well, it worked out in terms of materialistic gain, but in terms of meaning and value in an individual's life, it became reduced to what are you producing for the city-state? And we have never left this mindset. We've never left this level of destruction. It's only gotten worse. The chosen way. The path humanity walks is ultimately chosen by the collective will of us all. This path chosen is unsustainable, does not respect the individual, and was originally chosen for us by people who do not have our best interest in mind, but is maintained through the consent of the many. So, it's a path that's chosen by the few. They've implemented themselves into the minds of the collective. But because the collective continuously chooses the way that was set for them by others, it ultimately, the responsibility is bared by the collective. The numerical superiority of humans is what matters. Because the elite can only go so far. Their words rely on people to actually follow them and do them. And while, like I say, many of us don't know better, because the modern man and woman has, from the time they could cognize information into knowledge, been bombarded with illusions by those who see them nothing more than a number in a system. The people are acting on these false illusions in a way that basically revolves around their whole life. People live their whole lives according to what society tells them to be. And this is the problem, is that we accept this. As long as we accept the ways of the few, the responsibility will always be on the collective. Because at any moment, even though generally the collective doesn't know any better, they could stop. To examine why the elite know the information they feed us from the time we're children is false is because they do not actually uphold their own standards for themselves. And by this I mean they don't actually follow their own laws. They don't pay taxes the way regular people do. They have ways to get around this because they are the system is built for the elites. So they don't have to follow the rules that keep all the other workers in line because it's not for them. Whether in ancient times or in modern times, because of divine mandates or the social contract, the legal enforcers of the ruling class are to maintain order. When their whole existence revolves around defining what is right and wrong for everyone else, they are bound to spiral out of control and into chaos. And this is because, first of all, divine mandates and the social contract, they are the same thing. The only difference is that now, instead of saying that the laws come from the gods, like in Hammurabi's code, with the social contract, we're saying now we've come to an agreement based on some sort of humanitarian or humanist perspective, where humans should be able to rule themselves. But the trick is with secularism is that it still revolves around a ruling class to implement the laws of the so-called collective, or the will of the collective, or so-called will of the collective. And I say so-called will is because I never agreed to the social contract, and I know a whole lot of people who never did. So really, we're just born into this so-called social contract and told that it's our will. And the reason that defining what is right and wrong for everyone else is a bad thing is because when your whole existence is to make laws and revolves around making laws, eventually you're going to reach a point where you've made so many laws that you're just going to naturally criminalize people who aren't even causing any harm to other people. And I think that it's Lao Tzu who says in the Tao Te Ching something like, the more laws you create, the more criminals you create. No human being is to be above the divine mandates or social contract. And this is why I say that they failed. It's because if they really took that social contract seriously, we would not be seeing any Epstein files in 2026. This whole PDF ring that runs the world, they would have been squashed decades ago if governments actually took the social contract seriously. But they don't, because it's ultimately designed to protect these types of people, and it always has been. When civilization fails on its supposed principles of maintaining order and holding all accountable, there is no clearer sign of a failed civilization. I mean, what more do people need to see that the elites do not follow their own rules? I mean, it's common knowledge now, but when this is happening, there's no principles within civilization that matter. The only principles that matter is that the rest of us lower class workers fall in line. And how long are the people really going to put up with that? Ultimately, the true goal of every civilization which has been operated by the system's dark trinity, or the unholy trinity, is to create a habitat where the human being is safe, submissive, and ready to work for the collective. Therefore, the social contract and the divine mandates of the gods, which are one and the same, have never been about true order, which is natural law, as I explained in some of my previous videos. It's always been about their order. And their order is exactly what I said, to create a habitat where we're docile and submissive. And it's been going on for far too long. And if we look at this picture on the right, I picked this picture because to me it seems like this is what humanity has chosen for itself. We have no problem allowing ourselves and our fellow neighbor to be strong-armed by people who don't know the difference between right and wrong, police officers. Instead, they get told what is the difference between right and wrong, and then they get paid to go out and enforce what other people have told them is right and wrong. And of course, they never go after the guys who they should go after. So here is a diagram of the dark trinity. We could see it's how they overlap. The first is the legal system. And this is the most obvious of these three systems because if you violate a law, you're going to have cops or some sort of enforcer of violence descend upon you and coerce you, basically. But without the monetary system or the religious system, there would be no laws. Like, imagine if cops, they had no gun, they had no badge, they had no uniform. They were just some dudes who approached you in street clothes. No one would take them seriously. So they need funding. They need material gain from us people to basically make them legitimate. And the religious system has basically trained everyone to believe things whether they're true or not. And because religion came first, religion came before money and before government, it basically trained people to believe in things that weren't real, so that when these other things came along, these other abstract ideas like legality and the monetary system, people fell right in line with them because they were already conditioned to believe in things that weren't actually real. And eventually, religion basically married the monetary system and the legal system to harvest human energy and potential, which is what sits in the middle there. That's the whole goal, to create these systems which surround the individual so that these systems can extract energy from them. If you were to remove any one of these things from the Trinity, instantly the systems would collapse because they all rely on one another in this interconnected web that entangles everyone that makes up the collective. But remember, these systems are not for the privileged few. They are there to ensure that the collective falls in lines with the traditions that the privileged few uphold. And this leads me to my next question. Is there a better way than what we're doing now? Well, I would say that there must be. There are undoubtedly better ways which exist. Because everything exists. Anything is possible within the realm of the material. This is precisely why the world is the way it is now. Because all possibilities exist simultaneously, and some individuals have been better at manifesting the possibilities they want compared to others. Guys, literally anything is possible in the world, and everything is happening. The only reason that we're on the path we are now is because we have collectively chosen to manifest this path, because we have been guided by people who understand these sorts of things better than the collective does. Imagination is the key to understanding the possibilities that exist within your life. It is seeing the world or your life in a way that acknowledges the fact anything can happen and seeing the possibilities that could happen. Therefore, imagination is simply the ability to see multiple paths in life simultaneously and form images of a different life. So you can think of Doctor Strange in the Avengers when he's looking at all the different possibilities of how to defeat Thanos. All of these different possibilities exist simultaneously. It's just a matter of which possibility are you going to actually bring about as a reality in your life. And that's dependent on the actions you make and the choices you make in your life. Those in power have little imagination in reality. It's simply because they are riding on the momentum and of the imagination of those who came before them that they are in positions of power. Way in the past, whoever these people were that created these traditions that I'm talking about that the elite uphold, they had a very strong imagination, and they had a lot of knowledge of how the world worked. And the elites today are literally just riding the momentum or the wave that these people created for them. Once an individual recognizes that all things are possible, the ability to focus on a better path for oneself becomes clearer, because there is a possibility that exists which maximizes the amount of freedom for all individuals. Suffering, pleasure, freedom, and slavery all exist simultaneously around us, and it is our actions guided by our intentions and our imaginations which puts us into alignment with certain possibilities for better or worse. It's all about what are we choosing to do? What do we want in life? What are our true desires? What are the limitations of our knowledge? This is what prevents us from manifesting different realities and different life paths. But if you can see the different life paths and recognize that they exist, you're already ahead of most people. And you can craft or pick the path which seems most desirable for yourself. And this is what the elites have done. They were given a system which was crafted by other people, and they have a lot to lose if they let these systems fall, because it basically gives them a free ride through life. Individual authority needs to be reclaimed. Okay, we're not slaves of the collective to obey the decrees of the ruling class. We're not to be productive members of society. We're to live our own lives and author ourselves. That's what authority is all about. Authoring your own life. At a fundamental level, every individual owns themselves because they are the ones in control of their body, which is the biological mechanism which allows consciousness to interact in the objective material world. No one has any obligation to live their lives according to the mandates and edicts of another, nor does any individual owe any sort of labor or productivity to the collective whole of humanity. As it stands, the biggest hurdle to individual freedom is the imagination of the individual themselves. Most individuals have been indoctrinated to believe that others owe them something in life. Conservatives want to keep more of what they own. Liberals want others to share more of what they own. However, the conservative thinks obeying the law is moral, whereas the liberal is more likely to recognize that legality does not equate to morality. Furthermore, the conservative is more likely to recognize that taking from others and redistributing it against their will, their property, is illegitimate and immoral. Both sides recognize to some degree that no one should live their life according to the decrees of another, or that no one owes their property to anyone else. But they fail to recognize exactly what that implies because they have been indoctrinated to believe the middleman, known as the state, is needed to make these services necessary. And the state or the government relies on coercion to make these systems necessary, which is why they are illegitimate, which is why there's no individual authority in this world. It's because people believe in these services that the government provides. It is not the government's fault for doing this, however, as the government does when they act in a way that dissatisfies people. They're simply acting within their own nature, which is to secure their own interests at all times. Their interests include, above all else, appearing as the strong stabilizing force of society, which in order to do so, they must appear competent and force everyone to comply to the arbitrary standards which government sets for them. Because if some people decide not to comply with the government standards, well, that opens the door for more people to not comply with the government standards. So therefore, those people must be dealt with, regardless of if the government standard that they're disobeying or not, or the laws that they're disobeying or not, are actually legitimate because they're preventing people from harming one another or not. That's the only legitimate government laws that have ever existed, is the ones that prevent harm. And the way they do this is through harm. So therefore, the government, really according to their own laws, would be illegitimate. It is the people's fault for allowing the government to rule over them in the first place, because by doing so, the government is signaling to the ruling class they do not have imagination. They do not have agency. They are essentially an infant who needs to be handheld and walked through life by a group of elites who know better. Because of this lie that we need a ruling class for order, humanity has been stifled on the individual level for thousands of years. Each one of us who has been forced to live in such a coercive system. All of us are basically treated like children. We don't have any authority over our lives. We're forced to give it over to the collective, which is run by the government, just by living within the world. This is the reality of our world. And if we want to solve this, we have to respect each individual as their own sovereign being. They own themselves. No one else owns them. No one else knows what's better for an individual besides the individual. So they need to be allowed to live their life as such. Why be a parasite? Human beings' lifestyle does not just come at the expense of the individual, but at the expense of the entire Earth biome. That is the shared environment of all life on the planet. Because of our intellect and our ability to manipulate matter in ways animals can't, we have a higher responsibility in nature. All this means is that human beings impact the world is far more noticeable and substantial than any other organism that exists. Only a human being can create a mechanism which allows them to fly in the air, a mechanism which allows them to go underwater, float on the surface of water, and travel land faster. Cars, airplanes, submarines, boats. You're never going to see any other animal make anything like that. And you're certainly not going to see them make technology like that that stretches into all four domains of the surface of the water, under the water, land, and air. Animals, for the most part, are restricted to their bodies, and like beavers, for example, or birds, they can pick up wood, they can manipulate wood to create nests or dams, which affect the environment. But they don't come close to the level of human does. This is why humans have more responsibility. It's because our impact on the world is greater than any other animal. And not only that, we can actually understand and cognize our impact on the world in a way that animals, most of them, can't. You know, maybe the dolphin can, or the whale, but that's a maybe. I wouldn't be surprised, though. They are pretty smart. We have chosen to give ourselves over to technology, which has allowed us to manipulate matter in a way that nothing else can, in parasitic ways. This means that what we make, like I say, it does not give back to the earth. All it does is take, and take to sustain itself. Farmland does not give back to the natural habitat of the earth, because farmland only basically makes it okay for farm animals to live there, and all the other animals are basically unwanted. As it stands, human civilization is measured by 3 words: gross domestic product. This is the sum total of what a nation produces within a year. When the human's collective's whole goal becomes the production of materialistic goods and the manipulation of materials in the form of services, humanity becomes guided by technique. Technique involves a wide range of tasks, but it always involves how well you can manipulate whatever object a human being has crafted and how well the object was crafted, whether it's a weapon, a guitar, a paintbrush, or a gardening hoe. All of these things are mere extensions of the human being, which is why technology is called just that. It's a mix of the mind, the logos, with technique. This means that we power the tool, but without the tool, we would not be able to create society as we want. We formed a symbiotic relationship with our technique and our output, rather than the force which actually sustains life, or the habitat which actually sustains life, nature and the earth itself. Because again, going back earlier, just like a cancer, human beings are convinced that nature is trying to kill them. And this is just not the case. So because of this fear, we basically have created a society that is a danger to the earth, in a very similar fashion to the way a cancer cell is a danger to the human body that it manifests itself in. We can achieve symbiosis. It's entirely possible. Human beings used to live in a state of symbiosis with nature. We were not always this parasitic force on the earth. It wasn't until we began to equate individuals to the worth of their output that this phenomenon manifested itself in the beginning. Centralized technology revolves around taking. It takes things and recreates them in its own image, but it has given the illusion that human beings are the ones who are crafting the world in their image through technology. So this means that we're not shaping the world the way we think we are. Technology is shaping us and the world around us the way technology deems fit. Because either we're living in a state of symbiosis with nature, or we're living in a state of symbiosis with our own technique. First, technology takes resources from the earth to build and maintain. Typically, the more complex the technology is, the more materials and complex the building pattern to create the piece of technology is. In the modern day, technology such as LLMs and other AI models and quantum computing, the resources necessary to build and maintain these infrastructures are immense. Large amounts of water, large amounts of metal, large amounts of natural land. All the while, these facilities give nothing back to the natural environment except loud noises. If you don't know that, guys, just look up how loud these facilities are. They violate OSHA standards for workplace volume, and they're just out there, basically screaming away, sucking away, giving nothing back to the natural environment which actually created it. Only within its own specific technological habitat is it useful, and this is, like the internet or the digital space that satellites and LLMs work together with to create. However, for everything outside of these artificial habitats in the natural world, it is a danger. And the reason it's a danger is because it's actively taking the very resources that these life forms need to sustain themselves, taking it away from them to sustain these LLMs or whatever other technology that requires such resources to sustain itself. If human beings were really the ones guiding technology, there would not be machines of negative outputs sharing a parasitic relationship with its environment. Instead, you would see cities resembling that as described in the Garden of Eden or that of Dilmun. Gracious landscapes where food is plenty and the wildlife coexists with humans in a beautiful way, which is possible, guys. Ultimately, it just revolves around respect and love towards the animals. And we can have more peaceful interactions with the animals. Now, I'm not saying all the animals are going to be good. Like you could still get attacked by a bear or an apex predator. But for the most part, if the animals sense a change in the way we think and feel towards the land, that sense of change will be reflected in the way they behave towards us. Because the animals know. They understand what is naturally good and what isn't. The only reason that they really behave the way they do is because they're forced to eat to sustain themselves. This is not the reality human beings have crafted for themselves because we have become slaves to our own tools. So essentially, we're crafting the reality that our technology needs to sustain itself, not actual life. Deep down, most human beings want this setting. They want Dilmun. They want Eden. They want to live in nature. The problem is that this stuff has been conditioned out of us through fear. In Sumerian hymns and songs, humanity is recognizing a time that was lost when gods walked the earth. What they're remembering is the time before technique took over their lives. The model of civilization designed around technological output does not just take from the earth, but from human potential as well. Now, don't get that twisted, because technology can absolutely be a beneficial thing if we worked with it correctly. But since we don't, all it does is detract from human potential and extract value from our lives and basically puts our value into our output. And this is really why there's so many depressed people. There's so many people who just feel disconnected from one another. It's because human beings have been slaves to technology for so long that now we've created an unprecedented technological system that is designed to extract value from people and put it into their outputs. It's symbiosis with technology. It's not symbiosis with the natural environment which we actually live in. So this leads to my next question. Did human beings at one point live better lives? Did these wonderful ancestors who we're looking at here, or the depictions of them, did they know stuff that we don't know? Were they just, or were they given a bad rap? And, we're told that they lived such dangerous and brutal lives. I think that these people here are the key to solving our problems in the modern day. Before getting into how these people hold the key to a better life for us all, let us first address the myth of modernity. Contrary to popular belief, humanity is not more free than they were before, nor are they even more comfortable. Collectively, humans have been told that the modern day is exponentially a better place to live in than humans living 10,000 years ago. And the reason that it isn't is because, unlike people living before this time period of when civilization came into being, there was no arbitrary standard for what you must live by. The standard was dictated by the survival needs of the group and maybe some customs that they had that would have differentiated them from other groups. Not only this, the myth of civilization advancing throughout its history is also prominent. Science, medicine, engineering, and other technology has undoubtedly made life in many ways better and easier for the average person. And I'm not a science denier. I acknowledge that it has improved the quality of life in many aspects. However, I'm trying to point out the cost that technology has had for these improvements. They're not really spoken about or acknowledged the way they should be. People like Lewis Mumford addresses this when he describes things like the mega machine and how humanity is just, as an individual, become a part of a larger structure or system that is made up of moving parts similar to a machine. But ultimately, civilization doesn't really advance. The reason it doesn't really advance is because it's the same structures that the technology and the science is helping to secure. The only thing that really advances in civilization is technology. However, the function of civilization remains the same: to maintain rulership over a large population of workers so that the collective is managed by the few who benefit from the output. Because technology is ultimately designed by the few who manage the output, it has only served to secure their rulership over the collective. The myth of civilization is that it provides security by maintaining a wall, whether it's literal or allegorical, between its citizens and the dangers of the world. In reality, it has built a closed-circuit system designed to contain the potential of human imagination and existence so that it could use our existence for their imagination. It is not accurate to think of civilization as a benevolent force, but instead of as a prison run by wardens who themselves are slaves to maintaining the very systems they created. If they don't uphold their traditions, they lose thousands of years of work that their ancestors built, and they don't want to be the ones who are remembered for doing that. Because the elite, I think that they believe in the spiritual, and they are constantly trying to circumvent natural law and put it onto others by, having people do their dirty work. For example, a cop taking someone away to jail for an unjust law that a politician passed. It's not the politician who's going out and taking the people away. It's the cop who is choosing to enforce the law. And this picture on the right, it looks like it's from the Renaissance. It's an age that is generally remembered as a time of progress. But all that really came out of this era, things like the Industrial Revolution, was a more complex means of enslavement. There was a lost golden age at one point, and nearly every single mythology and religion around the world, with a few exceptions, remembers a time before some sort of lost age when gods walked the earth, or humanity was still innocent, or whatever it was. Life was better. Hesiod of Greece famously tells of a time known as the Golden Age when life on earth was flourishing, material abundance was everywhere, and the people were as principled as ever. And the reason the people were principled was because they didn't really know the difference between right and wrong. All they knew was the natural way of living. This is what innocence is. And when you're living in this sort of way, as a child wandering through the earth, you are essentially the principle incarnate. It was a time when people were in alignment with natural law. No one stole from each other. No one lied to each other because there was no need to. Hesiod describes 4 other ages: the Silver Age, Bronze Age, the Age of Heroes, and the Iron Age. Similar recounts are remembered in Native American mythology, such as the Hopi, who describe 4 ages, each of which ended because the people began to live out of alignment with natural law and began to steal from and lie to one another. Each age is essentially a devolution of consciousness, as is described in both the Native American mythology and the Greek mythology. So if we look to the Greek mythology, basically what ended the Golden Age was a rebellion against Kronos, the son of Uranus, who decided that he should basically be some sort of king or ruler, and was so afraid of someone challenging his rule that he would devour his own children, until eventually one of his children did overthrow him. And what it is unchecked ambition, which led to the end of that Golden Age. When observing the people who uphold the traditions of these ancient cultures and live as they did, such as the Dogons of Africa, we can see the principles that the ancients had in real time. The Dogons are a people who have survived thousands of years, countless attempted genocides, and still endure, not through war, but through attaining a balanced culture that remembers its roots. Such people are the key to unlocking what was lost. Now, the Dogons, they do have a coercive society, but their coercive society is centered around the prosperity of the individual. It values the life of each individual and each individual's place within the village. This is what civilization is lacking. Now, I would say that we could do without the coercive power structure, or it's basically like the will of the tribe is enforced on the individual. Now, they have their reasons and it's worked for them. But again, we can do without it, and we can achieve an age unprecedented. But we have to look to these people to understand how they're able to live so peacefully amongst themselves and, survive invaders. So the Enuma Elish, I think, is probably the most important mythological story to understanding what happened in the past. If we treat this myth as a geopolitical struggle rather than psychological archetypes or people anthropomorphizing the world around them, or even planets battling each other, a clear story emerges. It ultimately revolves around 2 sides. On one side, you have the forces of so-called order, known as the gods. And on the other side, you have the forces of so-called chaos, typically referred to as monsters or beasts. The side of chaos is led by Tiamat, who, to the mainstream narrative, is seen as the adversary and was defeated by Marduk, the champion of the gods. At the story's end, Marduk declares himself king and declares the gods to be the rightful rulers of the earth. And then he designates humans to be the servants of the gods after the lawful order Marduk establishes on the earth. From a geopolitical perspective, what's really going on here is a conflict between the first city-states and the human beings who lived in harmony with nature, who were seen as untamable to the city or incompatible with the ways of the city-state. As the saying goes, history is written by the victors, and it's clear who won this conflict. Whoever these gods were, they are frequently described as being afraid of Tiamat and her monsters because they symbolize the ultimate challengers to their rulership, a population still in harmony with nature. If the people accept the ways of the forest or the desert instead of the ways of the city, then the rulers of the city have no one to rule over. They must tame these perceived wild men and slay the monsters within them so they can subdue the earth properly, establishing dominion over it. It is a story which symbolizes the attack on nature itself and the time when humanity turned their back on nature in exchange for the output of the first cities. And this is even in the archaeological record. I'm fairly certain there's what's known as a genetic bottleneck that happened, I think, about 7,000 or 8,000 years ago. Essentially, what's happening is a small portion of the men that exist within the world are reproducing. Approximately one man for every 20 women is spreading his lineage. And then the rest of the men are just kind of going away. So some people think that a war happened. You really wouldn't even need a war. All you would need is a city which is generating output or knowledge that other people don't have, such as that of measurement, how to produce efficient tools, how to read the stars and read the seasons. This sort of knowledge would separate you from everyone else, and you could attract followers. And this would lead to those people who had that knowledge a greater ability to spread their genetics. Now, it probably was also very violent, but war was not the only tool used. I'm fairly certain that the people chose to go to the cities because they saw the output the city was giving, they saw the surplus of food, and they thought to themselves that they could make a good life here and grow a large family, and not have to be migrants or something like that, or nomads rather, not migrants. But this came at a cost, and the cost was the people running the cities have a serious God complex, and they expect the people they rule over to be docile workers, compliant with their rules and mandates, regardless of if they're legitimately protecting them or not. So the Enuma Elish, I think, is a geopolitical declaration of the city-states declaring victory over nature. So, what is the solution to reconciling the mistakes of the past? I would say that it is basically egalitarian voluntarism. This would be an unprecedented achievement in human history, because while the golden ages are remembered fondly, the only reason they existed was because human beings did not have a hierarchical system based in the authority of other human beings. Humans only answered to the hierarchy of nature. Egalitarianism comes first here because it's recognizing that as an individual, there are no higher powers than the will of nature and your own survival. In order to live, we must do certain things that maybe we don't want to do. And before civilization, survival hinged on the dependency of the group. People rarely resisted or tried to implement their own will through ambition because either it would mean their own death or social ostracization, leading to the loss of securities that the group would provide. So basically, if you were an ambitious person who thought that you should rule over everyone else, or you were some psychopath who wanted to lie to everyone to get your way, the people would recognize this because typically in these egalitarian societies, everyone was forced to share their resources. So if you didn't share your resources and you wanted to take more because you thought you were more deserving or because you were just uncaring of other people's needs, the group would notice this and they would ostracize you. And this was ancient man's defense against the people who wanted to rule over them the way the gods are described to have in the ancient mythology. Eventually, however, someone came along that was so much more advanced in terms of knowledge than everyone else that everyone just believed and accepted their rule. People rarely resisted or tried to implement their own rule through ambition because, I read that. Life was voluntary in the sense that individuals could leave the group if they so chose, okay? We do not have this ability today. Wherever you go on the planet, you're going to be subjected to a government system run by a monetary system with a religious system embedded within the nation. And these people basically think that everywhere you go on the planet, they own the people within their jurisdiction. This is inescapable. Before, you could escape this. If you didn't like your group, you could go find another group that was better. Or you could go be a nomad. But now, all the nations are essentially the same because they all operate based off of coercive violence or a monopoly on violence to enforce laws. And they claim all the land within their jurisdiction, meaning that to be a nomad is basically to be a homeless person under this system. Unless you're a very self-sufficient person in the wilderness, like a mountain man or something like that. Which is, I'd say they're rare these days, but they do exist. However, they would have to implement themselves into another group conforming to their ways or attempting to live within nature as an independent nomad, answering only to it. Voluntarism is simply a society which operates based off of voluntary consent for all the actions of the individuals within it. This means that everyone is living their life according to the way they want to, and they're respecting everyone else's ability to do so. No one is imposing their will over another because all actions are based in consent in a voluntarist civilization. So this means that even if we go back to the egalitarian past, where if someone wants more resources and they don't want to share with the group, and they have some sort of legitimate claim to, because, like, let's say they were the best hunter, they would be free to do that. But not to the extent where, it comes at everyone else's expense, because that's when it becomes a problem. But you don't have an obligation to provide for anyone else. That's the whole basis of voluntarism. an idea where people are free to live their lives as they so choose, based on the non-aggression principle, leaving other people alone, synthesizing the egalitarian ways of pre-civilized man with ways of living based off of the consent of each individual and their ability to live in the world is the only solution to solve tyranny, since it is the only solution which respects people enough to make their own choices in life and rule themselves while only answering to one ultimate authority, nature itself, or their own survival. And when people come to this realization, they're going to realize their survival is generally tied to everyone else's. And this is why pre-civilized man was so adamant on sharing the resources and using gift-based economies, was because they recognized that the survival of the group meant the survival of the individual. It wasn't that they were tyrannical and they wanted to force other people to live the way they wanted to. It was really the only way that they could answer to the hierarchy of nature, was by treating each other as equals and respecting each other. And through respecting each other, they respected the world around them. To synthesize the knowledge of the past and the wisdom of the past with the gnosis, or the scientific know-how of the present, we must find a way to balance technique and sovereignty. Technique is the skill or the craft that an individual uses to provide value to civilization. In prehistoric societies, technique was as valuable and necessary for survival as it is in historical societies. So technique's always been important. Just because it's out of hand now does not mean that mankind should abandon it. We do need it. However, since the civilizations of Mesopotamia, China, and Egypt, more important than survival is the amount of surplus an individual produces, or the amount of output an individual produces. So it's not about survival. It's not about social cohesion. It's just about output for the sake of outputs, because this is what the technology we've crafted demands, because it demands constant maintenance and constant updates. In the past, balance was difficult to achieve because resources were scarce. In the present, balance is impossible to achieve because civilization does not respect the individual who makes up civilization, nor does it respect the world it inhabits. Respect is what has been lost because equating individual to material output dehumanizes them. The people who run civilization do not and cannot relate to or empathize with the people they rule over, and therefore they lack respect. What people have got to understand is these people, they do not know or even care about what's actually good for the individual. They only care about what's good for the individual so that they can function within the society they're designing. They don't really want individuals to be self-sustaining. They don't want self-sufficient people. They want dependent people. The people who run civilization do not, to simply see yourself in other individuals and other life around you. When this happens, technology will begin to serve the individual rather than serving itself and the few who maintain it at the highest levels. So this picture here basically, I think, is a pretty good depiction of what should happen, what it could look like, at least in one image. It's just synthesizing the people who lived before with their egalitarian mindset with the technological means of the present and making a new future by respecting the individual and making sure that the technology serves the individual. As it is now, technology is basically being produced by companies and governments who are trying to outcompete each other. And when they do this, they forget the layman, or the Luddite, the person that they're actually building the technology for. And because of this, they get left behind. We need to make technology decentralized, redundant, and distributable in a way so that it is easily replaced or easily repaired, and that generally everyone within a culture or a society knows how to use the technology. And what that would look like is, I would think, as you go from place to place, technology would be fairly diverse, as opposed to now where it's mostly a centralized grid. So the people making technology, they have to develop respect and remember who they're actually making the technology for, which is the everyday people who are going to use it, not the people in some foreign country or some other company who you've been told are your competition. So this leads to my final question. Why can't we reconcile the golden age with the modern ways? What are the hurdles or obstacles that we face to achieving this synthesis? The biggest and most obvious is the feedback loop. Our biggest hurdle to achieving balance is the fact that for over 6,000 years, we have been coerced and complacent with following the rules of the state, who equate our value to what we produce for them. Our output creates a feedback loop that demands our constant attention, and most people are too tired or powerless to do something different. All of our output demands constant attention and maintenance, or else it is worthless. There is no point in exerting energy, effort, and material resources to build a house if no one is to live in it. So what you produce with your labor and the technology that you have at your disposal, you're basically bound to it, or else you wasted your time. Technique has convinced people to take pride in their work and their outputs, as they see this as contributing to society. However, in a civilization of compartmentalization, individuals' attentions become more and more segmented as technology advances in complexity. Someone can take pride in their work, but they likely don't fully understand the implications of what their work produces within the larger system of civilization. And again, this is by design. Keep the people ignorant, keep the people segmented, so that way knowledge can be distributed towards the top of the hierarchy. And then this knowledge is essentially a resource that everyone else who falls down the ladder of hierarchy from the top does not have. As civilization grows from city-states in Mesopotamia, draining marshes to sprawling metropolises with no sign of natural habitat for miles is like a ratchet turning a clink. So, as I described with the Enuma Elish, you had the gods asserting their rule over nature. And what this entailed was basically terraforming the land. And when this happens, it basically doesn't stop. And the grips of which the civilization is imposing itself over the land become tighter and tighter as time goes on, never untightening. This means the means which grow civilization, that is the way civilization is produced, The means which grow civilization become tighter and tighter and are never relinquished. They never relinquish power back to the individual, just as a ratchet which only turns one way. This is known as the ratchet effect, which is essentially the systems and technological means of tyranny growing in strength and never relinquishing its power. This causes a feedback loop of dependency that takes individual strength, effort, and imagination to break the loop. Now, it is basically a cycle of Ouroboros because it's self-defeating. But there is one way to get a snake to stop devouring itself, and that is to put something like vinegar on its tail. It will be repulsed by the taste and spit itself out. So I think the only way humanity can break the feedback loop is through self-reflection or self-respect, and realize that the ways they've been living have been repulsive. And then, just like the snake spitting itself out, the feedback loop can be broken. But it will take effort, because the feedback loop has been strengthened for so long through trauma and through perceived progress. And I say it's perceived because, as I discussed earlier, the progress is an illusion. All that's really progressing is technology. Society has stayed the same. The same structures, the same pretty much everything. So another reason that humanity is in this position is we have forgotten the sacred word no. As the ratchet effect strengthens, humanity's forgetfulness of the golden age goes with it. And like I said, guys, one of the things about this golden age and why things were so much better was because people would tell the highly ambitious amongst them no. What ability that ancient man had that modern humans seemingly lack is the ability to say the word no. When an ambitious individual in the tribe began to take more than they needed or upset the balance of the individuals within the tribe, they would be rejected. Their strength and ambition would turn into a liability. If no one would accept their ways, they're seen as a danger. Strength and ambition are things to be valued for sure, because they do serve a purpose. Like in those days, hunters provided meat for the family or the culture or the tribe, and it was a good thing. But only under the right circumstances. And these circumstances basically contain the ambition to ensure the ambition does not harm others. Egalitarian societies of the past took it farther in the sense that you must use your skills to serve the group, but this was based out of survival. Again, like I said, it wasn't coercive, it was necessity. But nowadays, with our technology, we can create a civilization which balances what they had, the level of freedom they had, and maybe even go beyond it, and the surplus that modernity provides. Individuals must learn to say no to the ways that prohibit other individuals' ways of living their lives, as the fundamental right we all have is the right to be left alone. In the modern day, most scarcity and materialistic means have been met, and abundance is lurking around the corner for us all. It's a tricky thing to get this abundance, but if we stop rewarding the most greedy amongst us and we pull our technological means together to actually work for us instead of some system, abundance would be more easily attained. If we learn to say no to those who seek to divide the resources in such an uneven manner and claim moral legitimacy while doing it, then real change can occur. We must say no to the paychecks of jobs which allow the elite to force everyone into their way of living. Things like cops, things like soldiers. We don't need those people. And it's not like if those people don't join those organizations, they stop existing. The people are still here and they're going to be willing, just as willing as if they had joined the organization or not, to defend what they think is right. No is the word which expresses authority over others, specifically those who may be more harmful or deceitful in their intentions. By rejecting their ways, doors open, allowing new ways to be discovered that have never been before. And this is the key, guys. We tell the people who have been telling us how to live our lives for thousands of years, no, we don't need your ways. Instantly, other doors and other opportunities will be made available to us because we're rejecting the old ways and trying to craft out something new, but still something based in how humans used to live. And another thing that human beings forget is eternity. The biggest illusion the elites have always used to maintain their authority over others has been the scarcity of resources. We gotta dam up these rivers, or we gotta store all this grain because something could happen and we're not gonna have anything else. Basically, it's just putting people in a state of worry when there doesn't need to be any worry. Cultures who live in balance with their environment never have to worry about scarcity, such as the people of Bikini Atoll before the hydrogen bomb test. The people on this island were a great example of what it meant to live in balance with nature. They were all healthy. None of them went hungry. They lived joyous lifestyles, but that was before the governments decided to use their island as a nuclear testing site. Now, their way of life has been robbed from them, but we can look to the way they lived before and we can see humans living in symbiosis with the environment. Likely, they were destroyed because the government wouldn't want people to see that it's possible to live without a government. Therefore, this scarcity is only a result of the ruling class's own lies and parasitic lifestyle, which is basically governed by their traditions. The illusions of the elites have become the illusions of the collective because we, the collective, allow these people to guide us with their illusions. This is what saying no is all about. It's about not letting these illusions guide us anymore and basing our worldview and paradigm in truth. The individuals who make up the collective have forgotten that there is a higher power beyond who has the most advanced weapons arsenal. This power is as real as that of gravity or heat, and it is best to think of it as a social science discovered through the natural interactions of human beings. Just like we can observe someone jumping off a cliff is not good for them, just like we can observe someone is not meant to breathe underwater, we can observe human behavior and determine what is right and what is wrong. It is empirical because if someone is harmed, for example, if someone assaults one another, like if someone, for instance, hit someone in the knee with a baseball bat and then they were in the hospital for several weeks. Well, if the person never hit that person with the baseball bat, they wouldn't have to go to the hospital for several weeks or wear a cast or whatever. The fact of the matter is that because someone chose to harm this person in an observable way, they are taking away time and energy from this individual that they have no right to. And this is what harm's all about. This is why human behavior is a science. This is why natural law is a science. It's not just the physical. It is the unseen. And although it really, in this case, it is seen, because we're seeing how people are behaving and we can see if this is generally good for them or not. This science, discovered through the natural interactions of human beings, this power is eternal, unchanging, and the only authority that human beings legitimately need to answer to, because this is the only power which has any real effect in the world. Even the government and its soldiers and cops are operating within its power, because in order for them to force anyone to do anything, they must coerce you. And this is immediately going against the power of natural law. And because of this, because this is how we choose to live by accepting coercion, we're going to generate a worse world and a worse life for everyone else. This is what I mean by it's observable. Because we choose to accept slavery, the quality of life diminishes. Remembering eternity, remembering our connections to our ancestors and the lost ages that are so revered, followed by the ages which are less revered due to trauma and suffering, which was unprecedented in previous ages, is the key to freedom. Remembering is the key to freedom. And remembering is simply becoming or being a member again. This membership is always there for those ready to claim it, but due to the illusions of the world, it has become invisible. We are all members of nature, which is operated by forces beyond what senses and scientific instruments can detect. Living in harmony with those forces and achieving the balance of the sacred wisdom of prehistorical humans with the scientific know-how of today is what nature wants above all. When this is achieved, the collective will have finally achieved self-respect. And the reason for this is because by synthesizing the knowledge of the past, we will have looked to our ancestors. We will have seen ourselves in our ancestors, and then we will be able to synthesize it with the way we are living today. And this is what respect is all about. It's about seeing yourself in others. It's about seeing yourself in the world. And it's about knowing yourself and what's good for yourself. And what's good for yourself is generally good for everyone else. And this is the eternal truth. We're all connected to nature. Humans who lived hundreds of thousands of years ago were connected to nature. Humans who live thousands of years in the future are still going to be connected to nature. It's just a matter of, are we going to accept this connection or not? Are we going to become a member of nature or reject it? And that's my presentation, guys, on civilization. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And I'll see you guys again.